A big desire for people to have that work-life balance. Some people that we speak to on our teams and some of our clients get distracted when they go to the office because of the noise. Other people like to have that collaborative approach in the office. But the big thing that we are seeing is people want the mix.
Hi, and welcome to the Thoughtful Talent Show. I'm Jen Werner of Jen Werner Coaching.
And I'm Chad Ahern of Talent Teams Consulting. This season, we're welcoming fellow coaches back to the show to explore how people can move beyond naming and claiming their talents and start to aim their talents. We're calling this season Strengths Applied.
And today's topic is hybrid and remote work. So before we dive into that, though, and share our whys and some stats, we have to welcome back one of our favored guests from season 1, Michael Stafford. You might remember him from, and I'm just going to run through his top 5 because, after all, he was with us for 4 out of 5 of them. You might remember him from season 1, Maximizer, Input, and then Individualization, Relator, and his number 5 is Harmony. Michael is the managing director at the Chapter Coach and a senior coaching panel partner with Futureneers. Welcome back, Michael.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Chad. Delighted to be back.
I'm so glad to have you here.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I was just going to, for our audience, Michael is one of our beloved Ireland-based coaches. But where are you today?
Well, in the spirit of hybrid and remote working, I'm actually in London.
Oh, awesome.
I love it.
Awesome. All right.
So this, hybrid and remote work, the reason we're talking about this today is because this is not new. There were early adopters. This has been around for a while where there have been businesses in one place and their workers in another, and maybe potential where they come together at certain specific times to do some work together. So, more of that hybrid work. But since the pandemic, it really forced a lot of us to become remote. And in that, after that has kind of lifted, even though we still seem to see COVID running through the ringer on people, hybrid work has been much more popular as businesses want to have their employees come back into the office and employees want to stay home and get work done. We're seeing it, really becoming more popular. So the key of this really is to find out what works for you and your team and your business. And I think we really need to address the employee engagement around this purposefully, especially for remote and hybrid workers. So while we don't want to ignore those on-site workers, the way you engaged with hybrid and remote workers is much different. So that's kind of like where I was coming from with why this topic is so important for me. And so, Chad, I'm really curious to know, I'm sure you have brought for us a ton or have found a ton of information, because I know there's a lot from Gallup out there about this topic and around businesses who might still be struggling to find the right balance. So do you have any learning nuggets or stats to share with us?
Yeah, so first of all, I'll just say I think the stats are going to reinforce what you were just saying about sort of the transition and what the business and workplace environments are seeing. So there are 4 stats that all sort of parse together and really is a great foundation for our conversation today. So the 4 are as follows. 80% of remote capable employees expect to work either hybrid or fully remote. Okay. Now, half of hybrid workers, about 48%, are on a team that has not discussed any formal plan for how to collaborate. Okay. What's even more surprising is 21% of hybrid workers have not received required or optional training for how to work effectively in a hybrid work environment. And it's not much better for managers. Only 28% of hybrid managers have been trained by the organization to lead a hybrid team. Those all, I will admit, are all from Gallup. I would say that just a passing cruise of the internet, I think you will find similar stats from organizations like Gartner and others that keep stats on this stuff. So it's a prevalent thing, but we've got a bunch of people that don't really know how to do it well or haven't been trained or are having a tough time connecting and collaborating with those on their team. So, um, Michael, for you as our wonderful guest, I'd like to start, especially since you're in London. What's been your experience with hybrid and remote work? I know you coach around a little bit of this, but I know that you've also got some personal experience with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was researching this topic, I was like, there were so many places that you could go. But in order to keep it as succinct as possible, what we have found is there is a shift to hybrid and remote work, which has created both opportunities and challenges, especially for leadership in relation to, say, collaboration and managing engagement. As we know, hybrid work actually demands and reinforces intentional communication and courageous conversations and trust building to ensure alignment among team members and leaders. And that's a challenge because for some people during COVID or the pandemic, they went fully remote and the world turned on its head and we adapted. But then through that adaptation, we found there were things that worked really, really well. And then there was things that needed some work. One of the things as well that I would say is there's a big desire for people to have that work-life balance. Um, some people that we speak to on our teams and some of our clients get distracted when they go to the office because of the noise. Other people like to have that collaborative approach in the office. But the big thing that we are seeing is people want the mix. They want a bit of office and they want a bit of at home.
Yeah.
Michael, just to expand upon that, as Jen said, hybrid and remote work has been around for a while. What's been your personal experience with hybrid or remote work? Like, before you became a coach, or have there been other job experiences that you've had that you had the flexibility to do that mix that you were just talking about? Or
Yeah, I suppose when we talk even about the statistics that have been announced by Gallup, and all really, I love the way Gallup goes deep into the research, and even Deloitte have done some research on this as well. And excuse me, but when you think about it, for me, having throughout my working life in particular, I've had the flexibility to be able to either work remotely or in the office. And I find that in order to build trust, collaboration, psychological safety, and all of that, I find it needs to happen face to face at the beginning, especially when teams are forming. Afterwards, you can go to remote, but I really feel, and look, guys, I have Relator in my top 5. So I kind of need that. And with people that I work with that also have it, they need that kind of trust and deep connection with people that they struggle to get remotely.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, Michael, because that feeds right into my own personal experiences with this being high executing. I could say when the pandemic hit and I went, everybody went full remote, I was working for other people at that time. I was totally fine to be all by myself. I'm an individual contributor. I could do heads down work and not get distracted. I could really spend my time actually focusing on what it is I needed to do. But in those moments when I needed training, there was teams, and oh my goodness, did I spend so much time on teams, one-on-one with people, with a group of people. And it got to the place where, like, if I needed that connection, I could find it. But for those who maybe have more relationship building skills, they're, like more in that, like you said, having the relator. I do too, but it's down at 8. So it's not quite as high for me. But I'm thinking any of those people who have those high relationship building skills, I know they were all really struggling during the pandemic. When everybody got sent home and the only way to connect now is over the phone or through Zoom and Teams, I'm sure it was devastating to them.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And look, I've got individualization, harmony, I've got relator. Like for me and for the people with similar relationship building strengths, one of the things that I noticed that people used to say was they missed being able to just turn around in the office and ask a question.
Yeah.
Because you had to set up a Zoom call to see when someone was available and so on and so forth. So that connection and then actually in some ways it actually made the productivity lower because that answer that you could get straight away became a meeting request, which then became, something that had to be planned. And then that question that could have taken 2 seconds to answer all of a sudden became a 30-minute call.
Yeah. Right. And it's so funny that you bring that around, because when I was on site all the time, I was leading this cross-functional team. We were very team centric, but I still had my own individual contributor role. Like I still had things I needed to do. And it meant I was spending time before work hours and after work hours doing that work, because during the day I was constantly running around putting out fires. I was working with one person, getting interrupted about something else, running to find someone, that I needed to have an answer about. And what it's that like double-edged sword, like we talk about everything else. I think this, hybrid remote working versus being all on site, there is that we lost that little bit of productivity from being able to just turn around and ask, the person next to me, or watching someone do the work that you do and then be like, wait a minute, how did you do that? I never knew you could do it that way.
Absolutely.
We might have lost some of those things, but I do feel like we also learned a lot of tools like Slack, like Teams chat, all of these other little like chatting things we can do now that you can interrupt someone while they're working in a similar way as the tap on the shoulder kind of hovering over. It's just a little bit different. So I do think that the tools that have come out since the pandemic have gotten much better, and I will say it forced all of us to try to use our tools a little more intentionally.
100%. But I also would say the flip side of that is it also created more distractions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chad, go
so
for it.
I'm feeling I want to jump in here because I've had a slightly different experience with sort of, this is even pre-pandemic. This was actually before any of us knew the word COVID or coronavirus. So a lot of my professional life has been in roles that I think on the surface you would consider, in-person roles. I worked on college campuses and, had an office that I could lock, and I had a desk and had a computer. But here's the thing. Well, there was a lot of time, especially in the admissions world, where I was out on the road all on my own. I'd plan my own travel. I would be gone from the office for, a week or more at a time. And in those instances, it was just a sort of different version of what we now call remote. It was, yes, I had an office, but I was out there. And I think a lot of people that might be in, travel sales, in sales roles where you have to travel a lot might resonate with this. But it's just a kind of a reframe on, we've been doing this, right? There have been professionals traveling around the world, traveling around the country, being away from the home office. I think what has changed is that there's been a lot more focus on that balance, the things that we're talking about in terms of, can I get some stuff done at home or in an environment where I want to be versus where my office is directing me to be, or where I need to be to connect with people. So what was interesting is you were talking about the relationship building themes being kind of taking a hit during the pandemic. I actually found, at least in my quote unquote remote roles where I was out on my own, I actually had the opportunity to accelerate into a lot of my themes. So I know we're going to get to themes in a second, but like themes like responsibility, arranger, discipline all got highlighted because I was out on my own. I had to organize my own travel. I had to, figure out a schedule, travel routes, all the logistics and be responsible to show up to the appointments that I had already arranged to have, with whether it was a college fair and admissions or a high school visit, or when I transitioned over into alumni work, making sure I was connecting with the alumni in the right spot, the right office, and so forth. So it's just I just wanted to offer that, like, hybrid and remote work can can pose a challenge to some of those relationship building or even influencing things. I could see, with the same sort of person relationship aspect. But then some of us with more executing or more strategic thinking, where we need that time and space away to be on our own, might actually blossom. So I want to throw that out there, because it's just a different take on sort of the remote work picture.
I absolutely love that perspective, Chad, because as I hear it, I'm picturing people that I know are the very same and blossomed in the roles that they were in. And also, I say to myself, because of individualization, no one size fits all. And we have to understand and respect different work styles in all aspects of work. Some people will shine and blossom in certain, domains like executing. Other people will blossom in other roles, but we all have a mixture of our talents. Right. So we have to we lean in, as we say in our coaching language. Which one are you dialing up and which one are you dialing down in order to get the work done?
Yeah.
Well, to that end, let's talk about how you used your talents, Michael, to help you or your clients with this hybrid and remote journey.
Where do I start, Jen?
Start at the top, Michael. Start at the top.
I'll start at the top. Well, look, I suppose what I'll do is I'll start with how I adapted and how my talent served me, and then I'll give a couple of examples of how clients and also people in the team, what worked for them. So, maximizer number one. It's all about impact. It's all about focusing on enhancing strengths rather than fixing weaknesses. It's about helping teams to capitalize on what they do best. So for me, it was about, okay, what's going to be the best impact for the team, for myself, or for the client in this situation? So throwing that lens on initially. And as we all know, our talents don't work on their own. They work in tandem with others. Yeah. So then I'd lean into input, which is for me all about gathering information, probably too much at certain times, but gathering different perspectives to develop those best practices for hybrid collaboration. Everybody was learning. People were making mistakes. We were learning from those mistakes. People were doing things that were really working well, and then people were adapting them into their ways of working and trying to find a way that integrated into their business, even into my own business, and even into clients' businesses, offering those perspectives in order to get solutions. And I know I spoke about individualization already, but just to reinforce it, individualization really helped me to see things from other people's perspective, respecting the differences. Like, we have people that were, even myself included, that went through like a long COVID illness throughout the pandemic. I was able to adapt, and I was able to speak to clients and speak to people in the team and say, my energy level is not great in the evening time anymore. So I need to adapt my way of working to focus in on starting earlier in the morning and getting the work done. But I'm not going to be able to be contactable in the afternoon, late afternoon, evening, because energy has depleted. And people are very understanding of that. I then lean into relator, and as we all know, building deep, trusting relationships despite physical distance. Very
Yes.
difficult to do if the physical distance was there from the beginning. And that was one thing I noticed with some of the clients that we worked with. We worked with an organization that actually set up during COVID and were fully remote, didn't even have an office. All of the staff worked from home. And still, some clients to this day are working in that environment and it works for them. So there's no one size fits all. It's about
Right.
having those open conversations and really seeing, okay, I hear this, I hear that. Like people don't want to commute anymore because they can get up at, say, if they're starting work at 9, maybe get up at 7 or 8, do their morning routine that sets them up for success and not have to worry about getting into a car to go on a drive. Other people liked that decompression time in the car on the way to work to get ready for the day. So again, everything is different for people. And then what I found then with harmony, number 5 for me, was the ability to, I suppose, mediate and potentially see conflicts that could arise due to gaps in communication, due to remote settings, and try to nip it in the bud straight away. So there's a few examples of what worked for me navigating this remote and hybrid working.
Yeah.
For other clients that I've spoken to in preparation for this call that we were having today, they specifically were like, I love fully remote. And they're being forced to come back into the
Mm.
office. And there's multiple reasons for that. We have the big, huge companies like Amazon and other companies that are demanding a return to work for all. And unfortunately, they're going to lose really good talent because that's not what people want anymore. And people are going to try to find something that works for them. At the end of the day, if the KPIs and the work gets done, does it really matter if it gets done between 9 to 5? No.
Right. Yeah. Chad, do you want to talk about your talents to that,
Yeah.
or add anything to what Michael's shared? So
Well, yeah.
spot
Well,
on.
the first thing that just hits me square in the face is this repeating theme that you've hit on, Michael, of there's no one size fits all. And I obviously hear that coming out of your strong relator, your strong individualization themes, but also your maximizer. And it just makes me think about the stat that I think all three of us use pretty regularly is that, you know, two people having the same top five in the same order is the chance of that happening are 1 in 33.8 million, right? And so we have so many unique individuals um, around the world, even in our own communities. And to think about a one size fits all in the context of having so many unique individuals just seems purely in conflict with each other. And so I think it does behoove organizations to really think about what are the talents of their team members and what sort of environments are going to best work for those individuals or that team. And I think this goes back to the stat that we shared at the top of the show is, 28% of hybrid workers haven't been trained by the organization. Well, one of the first places, and this may sound self-serving considering we're all Gallup certified strengths coaches, but the first place has got to be know your people. And we've hit on that
Yeah.
theme in other shows. So I just think that really needs to come to be part of that training and understanding of how to lead a team, because it may prove out to be that, hey, everybody does need that high relationship building, that they want to be around each other, that they want to have that opportunity to turn around and ask the 2-second question. But then if you have a bunch of people that are high strategic thinking or need the space to be on their own and process ideas, then they're going to need that. And so
Yeah.
just knowing, having that awareness. So that's the thing that really I loved out of your point there, Michael. To answer Jen's question about how my themes have shown up, I've already kind of touched on them a little bit with my when we're talking about sort of our own experience. But my discipline, learner, and responsibility are really the ones that I have felt have been amped up as I've done more remote work, that now I work for myself. I work out of my house. This is my house. This is my office. But the three that I highlight, discipline, really, having me allowing me to come up with my own plan, but also to organize it in such a way. I also have high rangers in my top 10. So those two kind of pair together, and I figure out my week and slot it together in a way that I think is going to be successful.
Yeah.
But then, learner, I'm always interested in new approaches. I'm always interested in trying something new, or, I learn about something and then figure out how to apply it. And then, Jen and I, we would be remiss if I didn't strike on my responsibility, right? Because that also drives, even though I'm solo and I'm remote, I've got a responsibility to be there for my clients, or a responsibility to show up to networking things. I'm actually going to a networking thing tonight, Jen. And so the responsibility to show up and do the work is really important. And, as I highlighted before, that was really important when I was doing the travel type remote work. That if I didn't show up and make connections with the alumni when they were expected to, it doesn't look good on me or the university
Right.
that I was working for. And so high responsibility tends to play into being helpful in a remote environment, because you are essentially on your own and you need to be aware of your commitments and fulfill them. Um,
Totally.
I'm gonna flip this question back around on Jen. Are there any things that maybe we haven't hit on that you think have been super helpful for your remote work or your hybrid work environments?
Yeah, a couple. So I would say, for sure, I thrived when we went all fully remote. I love the downtime, the personal responsibility to have accountability to all my work. My achiever loved the work as hard as I want with no interruptions. So there were parts of that I really really loved. But it meant when we did need to get together, when there were those hybrid things where like now I can't just be fully remote, now I have to be in the office sometimes and doing some things, I had to completely change my mindset for what was happening on those days in the office, because I really needed to tap into my adaptability to help build connections, really leaning into like, I'm here because we need to be in person for a reason. There's a reason to do this. And how can I use my talents, which I want to just use my responsibility and my achiever and just work, work, work. But ultimately, like, there's a reason we're here together. We need to learn from one another. We need to like collaborate on whatever the project was that we needed to collaborate on. And in this moment, I can really lean heavily into my relator and my achiever to help us work better together. Like, so now again, like I love that achiever always wants to do, but it really needed to like come alongside someone else to be able to like find that place where being in the office on those hybrid days at first were a giant waste of time to me. To high relationship builders, they were like, oh, it's been so long since I've seen you. And now we are going to talk about everything that we've missed for like whatever. I'm like, oh my
Everything
goodness.
but work.
Yes. And I'm like, oh my goodness, can we please get something done? But in that moment, really leaning into my adaptability, into my relator, it took the change of that mindset to change my perception of what this workday was about. If we are getting together in person, this is doing something for us at a deeper level that I don't know
Yes.
that I understood at first. Like it's actually a little sad. It took me so long to figure it out. Oh, we're not necessarily here to work. I mean, we are, but it's a different kind of work. We're doing a different thing. There's a different agenda to this workday of us being together. And it's a lot more thinking and collaborating and a lot less, Jen, do the thing that you love to do, which is just heads down work.
Absolutely.
I think just to like put a little spin on it, I think back to when I was leading my multi-function or cross-functional team. I think I would have really struggled with this, like some people at home and some people in the office, because for me, the being at home or being, siloed meant that I could get lots of work done. But that's how I get work done. It's not how Chad gets work done. It's not how Michael gets work done. And it may not be the best way that my team gets work done. So I think my belief maybe could have gotten in the way of that with this black and white thinking of there's one right way to do it, And then I think with my consistency, that's another one where I worry, like if there are some of these people who want to be in the office all the time and others who want to be remote all the time, and then the mix of them, do I worry about if there's an unfair advantage that we're giving to like some over others because we're not all experiencing work the same way? So I think, as much as I want to say that I could lean into all these strengths and that they would always be positive and always be doing the right things, I do realize that, specifically those two, my consistency, which is at number 6, and my belief at number 3, do have that, like, I need to be super careful that those don't go, to the raw side while I'm trying to, get work done.
Absolutely, Jen. And I would even caveat that with where I have to be very mindful is with my relator and individualization, those relationship buildings, that's not the only reason why I'm getting together, because that's not going to serve a full purpose either. So, but isn't that the beauty of knowing our talents and understanding each other at that level in order to work better together? Like it's just, it's fascinating. I mean, and when you think about like even, and I don't want to go off on a sidebar here, but when you think about like people that's like some people that could struggle to be seen and heard in, say, a hybrid working environment, we have to get them to recognize their unique contribution, be uniquely you, as we say, as you beautifully say all the time. Yeah. We need as leaders of teams, we need to set clear expectations, be proactive in that regard, use the platforms that are available to us, but create those moments for visibility where you highlight achievements for the individual contributors or the team as a whole, because we have to praise and recognize people for the work that they're doing. Some people don't necessarily want to shout it from the rooftops, but maybe on a one-on-one level, they do like to be told, yes, you're doing a good job. And sometimes when you're working remotely, that's something that doesn't necessarily happen as often as it would in the office.
So good.
And also, just to throw this in, we have to remember for leaders, we cannot forget about the 4 core needs of followers: hope, trust, compassion, and stability. So as a leader leading people in those environments, those 4 areas are so important when it comes to bringing people along on the journey. As human beings, we like routine. It can be mixed, but we like routine. We like to know we're in the office 1 day a week or 2 days a week, and we have 3 days at home because we can plan. We like to know that, the hope is that this is where we're going and this is what, and everything else that comes with that. We have to be compassionate again for people's needs. Again, that's my individualization coming in strongly there. But then trusting the workers that are at home, that they're doing the work, and not assuming that because people are at home, they're not working as hard. Because I have seen people work even harder when working at home.
Yep.
Michael, it's interesting you mentioned about the leaders. Obviously, the 4 needs is something that speaks right to me. But I also want to bring in something you said earlier, which I think is really important, is yes, you've got to trust, but also the environment of psychological safety. You had brought that up near the beginning of this show, and fostering that environment so that when people, both for the manager, but also for the people that might be feeling unseen in that they do keep their heads down and just kind of do the work, but have the psychological safety for those people to every once in a while, sort of pop up their hand or pop up their head and say, "Hey, I'm struggling here," or "I need help," or this work arrangement isn't working well for me right now. I
Yeah,
thought that was a really important point that you made early on in the show, and I think it's worth noting here as we balanced, you know, new managers trying to figure out their teams and how to manage better, and understanding the hybrid work environment, but also to make sure that those that might work best in the background are kind of called out and help that they are heard. And
absolutely.
I really
I think
appreciate
that,
you bringing that up
yeah.
earlier.
And I think it even needs to be reinforced to the point that everybody will have their preferred way of working, but they're also working for an organization. So there are rules and there are guidelines on the organization as well. But we have people who will gladly just work in the background, don't want any recognition or achieve. They just want to achieve and do the work, and that's it. And then we have other people who are in a job and want to go for promotion and so on and so forth. One of the things we saw happen last year, particularly in Ireland, was a belief that was starting to creep in that if you weren't back in the office and you were at home, you were removing yourself from the work, and promotions were going to be something that may not come your way because
Mm.
you're not visible within the organization. And that became a real fear for people. So, but that cannot be a reason why people should be forced to go back into an office full time either.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you guys are speaking to this, like this place of the people who are struggling to be seen and heard, because I think it's really hard in remote working environments. Being a past remote worker, and I guess I'm technically still kind of a remote worker and a little bit of hybrid, but being in that place where I was an employee who was fully remote, it is really hard to be seen, especially if you are high executing and heads down and you just do the work. I will say, like, even as an employee who was in the office, sometimes if you're the one who's just head down working all day long, you do end up being one of those people who like essentially fade into the background because you're just consistent. They are doing the work. And I think the biggest like advice to those people, I would say, is like Chad said, even in our last episode, he said the words like be unavoidable. And I loved that because I think it's what needs to happen. Like we need to get involved. So if you are feeling like you're fading into the background or you're struggling to make some of those connections, and even if it's not necessarily important for you, it might be important to the company and to your trajectory in success, that you get involved, that you step up,
Absolutely.
that you set meetings that are important to you, that you talk about
Yeah.
topics and
Yeah.
projects and things that are in your wheelhouse, that are things that you want to do, and don't wait for the permission to set that up. Do it yourself.
100%, Jen.
If
And Jen,
you,
and that is so important because we always talk about developing our leaders to manage the team, but as employees, we have a
yeah,
responsibility as well to speak up and say, this is what I need, this is what I
yes,
bring, this is what what frustrates me. Think of the coffee sinks and so on.
mm-hmm.
Those courageous conversations, having those touch points and speaking up is also on the employee to do so. And then it's on the leader
Absolutely,
to then listen to that. It
yes,
cannot always fall on the leader. There's an over expectation sometimes that the leader needs to fix all of this all the time.
right.
And that's not necessarily fair.
Right. No, not at all. And I think it's really easy as a remote employee to sit back and complain that you aren't included, that, oh, well, no one ever thinks of me. And
Yeah.
if you've happily like stuffed yourself in the corner, there is the chance that that is happening to you. I just I just had a moment of where it was like someone was saying, like some of your star employees, these ones who are the hard workers and fade into the background, they're like the self-cleaning ovens, but they still need the attention, right? Like we still have to go back and have
Yeah.
the touch points with them. And if
Yeah.
you're that person who's not getting the touch points, get yourself out there to be touching up, like to reach out to others so that you are, making those connections so that you don't fade yourself into the background.
100%. And it doesn't have to be every day. The
Yes.
you set the scene with your leader or with the team around this is what works for me. Will that work for the team? You come to a common ground and people will work better together.
So true. Chad, you've
No,
been wanting to say something for a while.
no, it's just I first of all, I love this advocating for yourself thread that both of you have hit on really well here. I do want to go back though and talk about the managers, particularly since Michael, we highlighted your profile that in your bio that you have done a lot of coaching around coaching managers and teams. I'm wondering if you could hit on maybe some key training moments or some key leadership practices that have really worked well for helping particularly new managers, people that just like starting to figure this stuff out, about being proactive about kind of pulling forward the people that have faded into the background, of whether it's recognition or is there
Mm-hmm.
a particular practice you have found really helpful, that when managers implement, they get more out of their hybrid or remote teams.
Look, absolutely. And again, with different organizations, different things work. And we always go back to having those courageous conversations, weekly check-ins, whatever it is. But I suppose just to go back a little bit, we promote and we develop future leaders. And sometimes we don't give them the tools and the training to be able to navigate working with a hybrid team. So we have to start with anything and say, what are your pain points? We go back to the reality check. What's actually going on? What are the challenges that the person is facing? Once we get them, we address them and go, okay, what can we do based on this information in order for you to work better as a leader and also to work better managing a team? And we need to be reminding them that there are challenges. Let's not say there's not. There are going to be challenges. Depending on the leader and the talents that they have, they're going to have an offering that they're going to bring to the table. And then their team might not necessarily have the same, way of working that they would have wanted. So we always start with the reality check, find out the pain points, and then get them into a state of awareness. And we call it high definition awareness. Get them talking about their talents, understanding their talents on a deeper level so that they can have those psychologically safe, common language of strengths-based conversations, so that they can encourage those open dialogue with each other so that there's more intentionality, they're more adaptable, and they build the trust with the team. Because once they do that, the team feels valued, heard, seen, and will buy in. And I think that will maximize engagement and productivity.
Well said.
Yeah.
That's yeah. I think one of the threads that I loved out of what you just said, Michael, was that just like we were talking about the employee or the individual contributor being proactive, a leader cannot wait around for everybody around them to be proactive. They've got to go out and be proactive in inviting and setting up those conversations, whether it's at the team level or at the individual level. But yeah, there's a proactivity vein that I heard in your response there that I really liked. You can't just sit around and think that the team is just going to make itself happen. That is why leaders exist, or Why they should
Yeah.
be there is to help
Yeah.
build everybody up, but you've got to be proactive in inviting those conversations.
And
Well, and
ultimately, that's one of the responsibilities of a
yes,
leader is to lead, and people will follow a leader that is, and this is going to probably sound cliche, is human,
right.
is
Yeah.
is somebody that's saying, I'm learning as well. Let's figure this out together. And that is something that I think as the world did really well during COVID. We came together and we
Yes.
said, let's solve these issues now. Let's think of the innovation that happened and everything else. And let's not forget that there's a new normal, whatever that is, but that new normal isn't the same for every organization and even every country, even cities compared to rural. It's very, very different. But at the end of the day, if the trust is there and the leader is open to making mistakes and being vulnerable, their team, and I see it all the time, their team will say to them, oh my God, you don't know all the answers. Let's figure
Right.
this out together. And it takes
Ah,
a bit of pressure off the leader as well to
it
continue to grow.
it absolutely does. And I love that you brought in that like human component, because that's where I was going and thinking about when I was thinking about this and how we can really help those managers, and especially like some of the new managers or even older ones who've been doing this a while, but they've only had all on-site teams, and now they might have mixed teams. Like, so now we have some people who are in the office. Sometimes we have people who have to be in the office because of
Yeah.
their specific job, and then others who never come in. How do they even know how to like connect these people and keep this team going, and what connections need to be made? I think tapping into that humanness, it's what happened when everybody went remote and everyone was like, what are we supposed to be doing? The leaders reached out. They showed that compassion. They brought the hope. You built the trust by having those like one-on-one conversations. Are you okay? How are things going? Are there things you need? We asked such great questions as leaders during those first few months and within the pandemic. And I think we saw like a big spike in engagement because of some of those, Gallup did through its, all of its little testings, found, a spike in that engagement because people were being heard and listened to, and that those connections were there. I thought it was really great that they were spending the time to have the conversations about how this works. And I think that's the best thing they can do, is just have the conversation, find out what works with everybody.
Yep, absolutely.
Michael, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm really glad
Yes.
you joined us for the last, I think it's about 45 minutes. This has been a treat. Are there any like super quick key takeaways that you just like to put a really fine point on as we wrap up the show?
Oh God, super quick takeaways to a maximizer. I could be here all day. Um, okay,
Maximize your words.
okay. I'll dial down maximizer, and I'll just, I suppose, dial it down a little bit. I suppose key takeaways, okay? And it's probably a little bit of a repeat, but just key takeaways for me are hybrid work requires you to be intentional, adaptable, and you have to have trust. Otherwise, you're not going to succeed. Okay. Second of all, what I would say is, because it's all about strengths for us and talents, applying strengths in a hybrid setting allows you to have those courageous conversations in a safe way. We need to be proactive. There needs to be visibility. But strengths, look, I'll shout it from the rooftop, strengths-based leadership is essential. It's so essential. So for anybody listening that's out there thinking about strengths and talents, get on board. And organizations have to develop their leaders. We use the term make them future fit. And that involves them becoming more aware of who they are and the impact that they have on others. It comes down to emotional intelligence, but seeing people for what they bring, what they need, what frustrates them, and how they can work better together. And I think if we just continue to have there's this open dialogue and conversation and keep learning, we will find the ways through.
Well said.
Absolutely.
Was that short? Was that short
It was
enough?
perfect.
That was
It was
perfect.
perfect.
Really appreciate it. Michael, this, as I said, this has been a joy. For our listeners, as you consider Michael's wise words and the conversation we've had today, I'm going to continue to encourage you to keep playing to your strengths.
And as always, be uniquely you.
If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you find your podcasts.